The woman collapsed against the weathered fence post just as the sun began its descent over the Arizona horizon, her threadbare dress clinging to her thin frame as dust from the road settled around her like a shroud. Grant Novak, who had been mending the fence line along his cattle ranch outside Clifton, dropped his tools and ran toward her before his mind could catch up with his legs. She was breathing, barely, her lips cracked and bleeding from the relentless summer heat of 1882. Grant lifted her carefully, surprised at how little she weighed, and carried her toward the ranch house that stood proud against the copper-streaked sky. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, revealing the most striking green eyes he had ever seen, before closing again. "Hold on," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Just hold on." Inside, he laid her on the couch in his sitting room and fetched water, careful to give her only small sips at first. His housekeeper had gone into town for supplies and would not return until tomorrow, leaving him alone to tend to this mysterious woman who had literally fallen onto his property. As he wiped her face with a damp cloth, he noticed the bruising along her jaw and the way her hands were calloused and raw. Her eyes opened again after several minutes, and this time they stayed open, wide with fear as she took in her surroundings. She tried to sit up, but Grant gently pressed her shoulder back down. "You are safe here," he said, his voice steady and calm. "You collapsed by my fence. Do you remember?" She nodded slowly, her throat working as she tried to speak. "Water," she finally managed. He helped her drink more, supporting her head with one hand. When she had finished, she pulled away from him slightly, her body tensing. "Thank you," she whispered. "I should go." "You are in no condition to go anywhere," Grant replied firmly. "It will be dark soon and you need rest and food." "When did you last eat?" She looked away, shame coloring her pale cheeks. "2 days ago, maybe 3. Grant stood and walked to the kitchen, returning with bread and cheese, simple fare but nourishing. He watched as she ate slowly, forcing herself not to devour it too quickly despite her obvious hunger. While she ate, he studied her more carefully. She was young, probably not yet 25, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and a face that would have been beautiful without the marks of hardship etched into it. "My name is Grant Novak," he said when she had finished eating. "This is my ranch about 3 miles outside of Clifton." "Felicity Frost," she replied quietly. "I am grateful for your kindness, Mr. Novak. I will repay you and be on my way in the morning." "Repay me for what? Basic human decency." Grant shook his head. "You need more than one night of rest, Miss Frost. Where were you headed?" She was silent for a long moment, her hands twisting in her lap. "Anywhere. Nowhere. It does not matter. It matters to me if I am going to help you. You have helped me enough." Her voice grew firmer despite its softness. "I do not want to be anyone's burden." "You are not a burden," Grant said simply. "You are a person in need. There is a difference." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back stubbornly. "You do not understand. I cannot pay you. I have nothing." "I am nothing." The despair in her voice cut through Grant like a blade. He pulled a chair closer and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Why don't you tell me what happened? You don't have to, but sometimes it helps to share the weight." Felicity studied his face for a long time, as if searching for deception or ulterior motives. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she took a shaky breath and began to speak. "I was married," she said quietly, "to a man named Thomas Frost. We had a small farm in New Mexico Territory near Silver City. He died 6 months ago. A horse kicked him in the chest while he was shoeing it. He died instantly." "I am sorry," Grant said, and meant it. "I tried to keep the farm going, but I could not manage it alone. The bank foreclosed 3 months ago. I had nowhere to go, no family. I have been traveling, looking for work, but She gestured to herself. No one wants to hire a woman alone, especially one with no references and no skills beyond keeping house and tending a small garden. You have been on the road for 3 months. Yes. I worked in a boarding house in Silver City for a few weeks, but the owner's son became too familiar with his hands. When I protested, she dismissed me, said I was causing trouble. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. I worked in a laundry for a while, but the pay was so little I could barely afford a single meal a day. I thought perhaps in Arizona territory I might find something better, but the road was longer than I expected, and my money ran out days ago. Grant felt anger building in his chest, not at her, but at the circumstances that had brought her to such a desperate state. You should have asked for help. From whom? Felicity's laugh was hollow. The world is not kind to women alone, Mr. Novak. People see what they want to see. At best, I am ignored. At worst. She did not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. You are safe here, Grant repeated. I give you my word. You can stay as long as you need to recover your strength. I cannot accept that. Why not? Because I have no way to repay you, and I will not be in debt to another man. Her voice shook but held firm. I learned that lesson with Thomas. He was kind at first, but marriage made me his property, and when he drank, he reminded me of that fact with his fists. Grant leaned back, understanding flooding through him. The bruises he had seen were not fresh, but they told a story of their own. I am not asking for repayment, Miss Frost, and I am not your husband. I am simply offering you a safe place to rest until you are well enough to decide what you want to do next. Why? The question burst from her. Why would you help a stranger? Because it is the right thing to do, Grant said, and because I know what it is like to be alone. Something in his voice must have convinced her because she nodded slowly, exhaustion finally overwhelming her wariness. Just a few days, she whispered. Then I will move on. I will not burden you long. Grant wanted to argue, but he could see she was barely keeping her eyes open. We will talk more tomorrow. For now, you need sleep. The spare bedroom is upstairs, first door on the right. I will bring you some clean clothes. He helped her stand, steadying her when she swayed. At the foot of the stairs, she paused and looked up at him. Thank you, Mr. Novak, truly. Grant, he corrected gently. And you are welcome. He watched her climb the stairs slowly, each step an effort before turning away to give her privacy. In his own room, he found one of his shirts and a pair of trousers that would be far too large but cleaner than the tattered dress she wore. He left them outside her door and knocked softly before retreating to his own room. Sleep did not come easily that night. Grant lay awake, thinking about the woman now sleeping under his roof. He was 32 years old and had been running this ranch alone since his parents died of fever 5 years ago. He had hired hands who came during the day to help with the cattle, but the house had been empty except for the housekeeper who came 3 times a week. The loneliness had become so familiar he barely noticed it anymore, but Felicity's presence had awakened something in him, a protective instinct he had not felt in years. When dawn broke, Grant rose and made coffee, the familiar routine grounding him. He was frying eggs when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Felicity appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing his shirt which hung nearly to her knees, her hair loose around her shoulders. In the morning light, without the dust and desperation, she was genuinely beautiful. Good morning, Grant said, trying not to stare. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, Felicity admitted. The bed was so soft I thought I might be dreaming. Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready. She hesitated, then moved to the table. I should be cooking for you to earn my keep. You are a guest, not a servant. Grant set a plate in front of her, loaded with eggs, bacon, and fresh bread. Eat. They ate in comfortable silence, and Grant noticed color returning to her cheeks with each bite. When they had finished, she helped him clear the dishes despite his protests. "I cannot sit idle," she said firmly. "It makes me feel useless. You are recovering. I am eating your food and sleeping in your home. The least I can do is help." She looked around the kitchen, taking in the dishes piled in the basin and the general disarray. "When did your housekeeper last come?" "3 days ago. She will be back this afternoon." Felicity was already rolling up her sleeves. "Then I will help until she arrives. Please, Grant. I need to feel useful." He recognized the steel beneath her soft voice and knew arguing would be pointless. "All right. But if you feel faint or tired, you stop immediately." "Agreed." Agreed. They worked together throughout the morning, Felicity washing dishes while Grant dried and put them away. She moved carefully at first, as if testing her strength, but gradually became more confident. They talked as they worked, small things at first. Grant told her about the ranch, about the copper mines that had brought prosperity to Clifton, and the challenges of raising cattle in the harsh Arizona climate. Felicity spoke of her childhood in Missouri, of her mother who had died when she was young and her father who had remarried and started a new family, making her feel like an outsider in her own home. "That is why I married Thomas," she said quietly, scrubbing a stubborn pot. "I was 17 and desperate to belong somewhere. He seemed kind and he promised me a home of my own. I thought it would be different. I thought I would finally matter to someone." "You mattered," Grant said, "just to the wrong person." "Did I?" Felicity's laugh was bitter. "He married me to have someone to cook and clean and warm his bed. When I could not give him children after 3 years, he said I was useless. Perhaps he was right." Grant set down the dish he was drying and turned to face her. "He was wrong. You are not useless, Felicity. You are a survivor." She looked at him, tears threatening to spill over. "I do not feel like a survivor. I feel like I am barely holding on." "That is what surviving looks like sometimes," Grant said softly. "You hold on until things get better." The housekeeper, a stout woman named Martha, arrived in the afternoon and raised her eyebrows at finding another woman in the house, but said nothing beyond a polite greeting. Grant explained that Felicity was a guest who had been taken ill on the road, and Martha nodded, accepting the explanation without question. Over the following days, Felicity grew stronger. The dark circles under her eyes faded and her movements became more assured. She insisted on helping around the house, and Grant found he enjoyed her company. She had a quiet sense of humor that caught him off guard, and she was intelligent, with opinions on everything from politics to literature. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, talking until the stars filled the sky. A week after Felicity's arrival, Grant was working in the barn when one of his ranch hands, a young man named Daniel, came running. "Boss, there is trouble in town. The sheriff is looking for someone, asking questions about a woman matching Miss Felicity's description." Grant's blood ran cold. "What kind of questions?" "Something about a husband back in New Mexico. Says she might have stolen money when she left." "That is a lie," Grant said immediately. "Her husband died, she told me." Daniel shrugged. "Just telling you what I heard. Thought you should know before the sheriff comes out here." Grant nodded grimly. "Thank you, Daniel. Get back to work." He found Felicity in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. She looked up with a smile that faded when she saw his expression. "What is wrong?" "There is a man in town claiming to be looking for you, says you stole from your husband." All color drained from Felicity's face. "No," she whispered. "No, he found me." "Who found you?" "Thomas's brother, Caleb." She sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "Thomas did not die from a horse kick, Grant. That was what I told everyone, but it was not true." Grant pulled up a chair across from her. "Tell me what really happened." "Thomas came home drunk one night, drunker than usual. He started hitting me, screaming that I was worthless. I tried to get away and he grabbed a poker from the fireplace. He swung at me and I ducked. He lost his balance and fell, hit his head on the stone hearth. Tears streamed down her face. There was so much blood. I tried to help him, but he was already gone. It was an accident, I swear it. I believe you, Grant said quietly. His brother Caleb never liked me. When he found Thomas dead, he accused me of murder. He wanted the farm, you see, but Thomas had left it to me in his will. Caleb said if I did not sign it over to him, he would go to the sheriff and tell them I killed Thomas. I was so frightened. I signed the papers and ran. But it was not enough for him. He wants me dead, Grant. He cannot risk me ever telling anyone the truth. Grant reached across the table and took her hands. He will not touch you, I promise you that. You cannot stop him. You do not know what he is like. Then tell me. He is a mean man, Grant. He and Thomas were raised by a father who beat them bloody, and they both learned to take pleasure in causing pain. Thomas mostly directed his anger at me, but Caleb has no limits. He has killed men before over card games and insults. No one ever proved anything, but everyone knew. How old is Caleb? 28, I think, maybe 29. Grant sat back thinking. When the sheriff comes, and he will come, you tell him the truth, all of it. I will stand with you. He will not believe me over Caleb. Then we will make him believe you. You are not alone anymore, Felicity. Do you understand that? She searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her nod slowly. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. I know enough, Grant said. I know you are kind and brave and that you deserve better than to spend your life running. I whispered I would not burden you long, Felicity said, her voice breaking. But this is more than a burden. This is danger. Grant stood and pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle but firm on her shoulders. You are not a burden, Felicity. You are not now, and you never will be. How can you say that? Because it is the truth. He paused, knowing he was about to cross a line but unable to stop himself. Because in the week you have been here, you have made this house feel like a home again. Because I look forward to mornings now, knowing I will see you. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of you as a guest and started thinking of you as someone I could not imagine living without. Felicity stared at him, her eyes wide. Grant, I know it is too soon. I know you have been through hell and the last thing you need is another man making demands of you. But when you talk about leaving, about being a burden, I need you to know that you are not. You are my future, Felicity, if you will have me. Your future, she echoed. Yes, stay. Not as a guest or a housekeeper, but as someone building a life here, with me. We will face this Caleb together, and whatever comes after, we will face that together too. I am damaged goods, Felicity whispered. I am a widow with nothing to offer you. You are a strong woman who survived hell. That is what you offer me, that and your company, which I have grown to treasure more than I can say. She was crying now, but she was also smiling. You hardly know me. Then we will spend the rest of our lives getting to know each other better. Before she could respond, they heard the sound of horses approaching. Grant moved to the window and saw the sheriff riding up with two other men. One of them was tall and lean with a cruel face that twisted into a sneer when he saw the house. Stay inside, Grant told Felicity. Let me handle this. No, I will not hide anymore. They walked out onto the porch together, Grant slightly in front of Felicity. The sheriff dismounted, a weathered man in his 50s with tired eyes. Mr. Novak, the sheriff said, this is Caleb Frost from New Mexico. He says you might be harboring his sister-in-law. I am harboring no one, Sheriff. Miss Frost is my guest. Caleb's eyes fixed on Felicity, and even from several feet away, Grant could see her shudder. There she is. That is the woman who murdered my brother and stole his property. That is a lie, Felicity said, her voice stronger than Grant expected. Your brother died in an accident and I signed over all rights to the property to you. You have what you wanted. I want justice, Caleb spat. You killed him and you will hang for it. The sheriff held up a hand. Miss Frost, Mr. Frost has sworn out a complaint that you killed his brother in cold blood and fled. He has witnesses who say you and your husband fought constantly and that you threatened to kill him. Witnesses he paid, no doubt, Felicity said. Yes, we fought. My husband was a drunk who beat me regularly. Ask anyone in Silver City who knew us. Ask the doctor who treated my broken arm last spring. Ask the reverend who counseled me to be a more obedient wife when I went to him for help. The sheriff's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. Even so, a man is dead and you fled the scene. I fled because Caleb threatened to kill me if I did not sign over the farm. I was afraid and I had nowhere else to go. Lying witch, Caleb snarled. He started forward, but Grant moved down the steps to block him. You will not speak to her that way, Grant said coldly, and you will not threaten her on my property. Your property, Caleb laughed. You have been charmed by a pretty face, friend. This woman is a killer. This woman is under my protection, Grant replied. And unless the sheriff has an actual warrant for her arrest, she is going nowhere. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. I do not have a warrant yet. I came to investigate the claim. Miss Frost, would you be willing to come into town and make a formal statement? No, Grant said before Felicity could answer. Not until you investigate Mr. Frost's claims thoroughly. Contact the authorities in Silver City. Get statements from people who actually knew Miss Frost and her husband. Then, if you still have questions, we will cooperate fully. That could take weeks, Caleb protested. Then you will wait weeks, Grant said, unless you have a problem with proper legal procedures. The sheriff studied Grant for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. I will send some telegrams. In the meantime, Miss Frost, I must ask that you remain in the area. She will, Grant said. She is not going anywhere. Caleb's face twisted with rage. You are making a mistake, Novak. That woman is poison. The only mistake I see is you coming onto my land and making threats, Grant replied evenly. Now get off my property before I forget my manners. For a moment, Grant thought Caleb might try something, but the sheriff put a hand on his arm. Come on. We will let the law handle this. They rode away, but Caleb looked back once, his eyes promising violence. When they were out of sight, Felicity sagged against the porch railing. He will not give up, she said. He will find a way. Then we will be ready. Grant turned to face her. Felicity, I meant what I said before. You are not alone. This could destroy you, your reputation, your ranch, if people think you are sheltering a murderer. Then they will be wrong and eventually the truth will come out. He took her hands again. I am not asking you to decide anything about us right now, but I am asking you to trust me enough to let me help you through this. She looked up at him and slowly she nodded. All right. But Grant, if this goes badly, if the sheriff decides to arrest me, you let me go. You do not fight for me. Promise me. I promise no such thing, Grant said firmly. We are in this together now. Over the next 3 weeks, life settled into an uneasy routine. The sheriff sent his telegrams and began receiving responses. The doctor in Silver City confirmed treating Felicity for multiple injuries consistent with beatings. The reverend, while disapproving of divorce, admitted that Thomas Frost had a reputation for violence when drunk. Neighbors spoke of hearing fights and seeing Felicity with bruises. As the evidence mounted in Felicity's favor, Grant and Felicity grew closer. They worked side by side during the days, and in the evenings they talked for hours. Grant learned about her love of reading, her talent for growing herbs, her fear of thunderstorms. She learned about his dreams for the ranch, his regrets about not traveling more when he was young, his secret love of poetry. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun paint the sky orange and pink, Felicity said quietly, "I think I am falling in love with you." Grant turned to look at her, his heart hammering in his chest. "You think?" "I know," she corrected, a small smile playing on her lips. "I am falling in love with you, Grant Novak. Perhaps I have been since the moment you carried me into your house and did not ask for anything in return." "I am already in love with you," Grant replied. "Have been for days now. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you. And this is the right moment. Every moment with you is the right moment." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she did not. Their lips met gently at first, tentative and sweet, then with growing passion. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Marry me," Grant said. "Not now, not until all this business with Caleb is settled, but eventually. Marry me and make this ranch our home." "Yes," Felicity whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They held each other as darkness fell, both aware that the battle was not yet won but finding strength in their shared commitment. The next day, the sheriff returned with news. He had received a telegram from a deputy in Silver City who had investigated the scene where Thomas died. The blood patterns and the position of the body were consistent with Felicity's story of an accidental fall. Moreover, the deputy had found 3 witnesses who had heard Caleb threatening Felicity the day after Thomas died, demanding she sign over the property or face murder charges. "Based on this evidence," the sheriff said, "I see no reason to pursue charges against you, Miss Frost. As for Caleb Frost, there are some questions about whether he coerced you into signing over property that was rightfully yours." "I do not want the property," Felicity said quickly. "I just want to be left alone." The sheriff nodded. "I will make that clear to Mr. Frost. He has already left town, said he had business back in New Mexico. With any luck, that is the last you will see of him." But luck was not with them. 2 nights later, Grant woke to the sound of breaking glass. He grabbed his rifle and ran downstairs to find smoke seeping under the door and flames licking at the window frames. Caleb had come back to finish what he started. "Felicity," Grant shouted, running back upstairs. He pounded on her door. "Fire! We need to get out." She emerged in her nightgown, coughing as smoke filled the hallway. Grant grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the stairs, but flames blocked their path. He pivoted, leading her to his bedroom at the back of the house. "We have to jump," he said, throwing open the window. It was a 10-foot drop to the ground, but the fire was spreading fast. "You go first," Felicity said. "I will follow." "No, you go. I will catch you." Before she could argue, Grant climbed out the window and hung from the ledge, dropping the last few feet. He looked up to see Felicity hesitating. "Jump, I will catch you." She climbed onto the ledge, and for a terrifying moment, Grant thought she might freeze, but then she jumped. He caught her, both of them tumbling to the ground. Grant hauled her to her feet, and they ran toward the barn as the house became an inferno behind them. "The horses," Felicity gasped. Together they released the animals from the barn, driving them to safety. Only when all the livestock were clear did they stop, standing in the field as Grant's home burned to the ground. "I am so sorry," Felicity sobbed. "This is my fault. This is all because of me." Grant pulled her close, holding her tight. "This is not your fault. This is Caleb's doing, and he will pay for it." As if summoned by his name, a figure emerged from the shadows near the barn. Caleb Frost held a gun, his face twisted with rage. "You should have let her go," he said to Grant. "Now you are both going to die." "Why are you doing this?" Felicity cried. "You have the farm, you have everything Thomas left. What more do you want?" "I want you to pay for ruining everything," Caleb screamed. "My brother married you and you made him weak. He stopped drinking with me, stopped doing jobs for me. He said he wanted to be better for you. Then you killed him." "It was an accident. I do not care. He is dead because of you, and you are going to join him." Caleb raised the gun, but before he could fire, a shot rang out from behind them. Caleb staggered, the gun falling from his hand. He looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, then collapsed. Grant spun around to see Daniel, his ranch hand, holding a rifle. "Saw the fire from my cabin," Daniel said shakily. "Got here as fast as I could. Is he dead?" Grant moved to check Caleb's pulse. "Yes, you saved our lives, Daniel." The young man nodded, still in shock. "I will ride for the sheriff." As Daniel galloped away, Grant returned to Felicity and wrapped his arms around her. She was shaking, her face buried in his chest. "It is over," he murmured. "It is finally over." "Your house," she whispered. "Everything you owned can be rebuilt, but I cannot replace you." He tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. "Houses are just wood and nails, Felicity. You are irreplaceable." The sheriff arrived an hour later with Daniel, along with half the town, it seemed. They put out what remained of the fire and examined Caleb's body. After hearing the full story and examining the evidence, including the can of kerosene Caleb had left behind, the sheriff ruled the shooting justified. "You are free, Miss Frost," he said. "No one will trouble you about Thomas's death again. I will send word to the authorities in New Mexico. As for your property, if what you said about coercion is true, you might have grounds to reclaim it." "I do not want it," Felicity said again. "Let his relatives have it. I just want to move forward with my life." The sheriff nodded and tipped his hat before riding off with Caleb's body. Grant and Felicity spent that night in the barn, wrapped in blankets and holding each other. As dawn broke, they surveyed the damage. The house was a total loss, but the barn and outbuildings had survived. "We will rebuild," Grant said. "Better than before." "We?" Felicity asked softly. "Yes, we." "If you still want to marry a man with no house and a property full of ashes." She laughed, the sound surprising her. "I want to marry you regardless of what you have or do not have." "But Grant, are you certain after all this chaos, all the danger I brought into your life?" "You brought life into my life," Grant corrected. "Before you came, I was existing, going through the motions. You made me feel again. You made me want to build something, not just for myself but for us. So yes, I am certain." They were married a month later in Clifton's small church, with Daniel and Martha serving as witnesses. The entire town turned out, having heard the story of the rancher who fought for his love and the woman who survived against all odds. Felicity wore a simple blue dress that Martha had helped her make, and Grant wore his best suit, carefully saved from the fire. As they stood before the reverend, exchanging vows, Felicity thought about how far she had come from the desperate woman who had collapsed by a fence post. She had believed herself to be nothing, a burden to be endured. Now she knew differently. She was strong. She was loved. She was home. The months that followed were filled with hard work and simple joys. Grant and Felicity lived in the barn while they rebuilt the house, working alongside hired carpenters during the day and falling into each other's arms at night. The new house rose from the ashes of the old, larger and more solid, with a wide porch that faced the sunset and a kitchen big enough for the family they both hoped to have someday. They moved in on a crisp autumn day, and that night, Felicity cooked their first meal in the new kitchen. As they sat at the table Grant had built with his own hands, she reached across and took his hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for believing in me when I did not believe in myself, for teaching me that I am worth loving." Grant brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You taught me just as much. You taught me that a house is not a home until it is filled with love. That courage is not the absence of fear but facing it anyway. That sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances." "I love you," Felicity said, the words coming easily now, no longer frightening. "I love you too. Always." Winter came, and with it, Grant and Felicity settled into married life. They worked together seamlessly, managing the ranch and building their future. Grant taught Felicity to ride, and she taught him to cook properly, laughing as he burned batch after batch of biscuits before finally getting it right. On cold nights, they sat by the fire, Felicity reading aloud while Grant worked on tack or other tasks, both content in the quiet domesticity of it all. Spring brought new life to the ranch and unexpected news. Felicity had suspected for a few weeks, but when the doctor confirmed it, she could barely contain her joy. "I am going to have a baby," she told Grant that evening as they sat on their porch. Grant's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, then pure elation. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before carefully setting her down as if she might break. "A baby," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby. You are happy." Happy does not begin to cover it. He knelt down and placed his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there. I am your father, and I already love you more than I thought possible." Felicity ran her fingers through his hair, tears of joy streaming down her face. After everything she had been through, all the pain and loss, she was being given another chance at happiness. Not just another chance, but a better one with a man who truly loved her. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Grant became even more protective, insisting Felicity rest more and work less. She humored him to a point but refused to be treated like an invalid. "I am growing a baby, not dying," she told him when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know, but what if you overexert yourself? Then I will sit down and rest. Grant, I need to stay active. It is good for me and the baby." They compromised, with Felicity doing lighter tasks and Grant hovering nearby, ready to help at a moment's notice. Martha found their interactions endlessly amusing and often teased Grant about being a mother hen. Summer arrived with brutal heat, and Felicity grew larger and more uncomfortable. Grant set up a bed downstairs so she would not have to climb the stairs, and he spent hours fanning her when the nights were too hot to sleep. "You do not have to do this," she said one particularly sweltering night. "I want to. Besides, where else would I rather be than taking care of you and our child, in a cool river somewhere?" Grant laughed. "Well, maybe, but I would want you there with me." The baby came on a cool September morning, arriving faster than expected. Grant sent Daniel racing for the doctor, but Martha and Felicity's instincts proved sufficient. By the time the doctor arrived, Felicity was holding a squirming, red-faced infant. "It is a boy," Martha announced proudly. "A healthy boy with a good set of lungs." Grant entered the room cautiously, as if afraid to disturb the sacred scene before him. Felicity looked up, exhausted but radiant, and smiled at him. "Come meet your son." He approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in her arms. When he got close enough to see the baby's face, he dropped to his knees beside the bed. "He is perfect," Grant whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Grant nodded, not trusting his voice. Felicity carefully transferred the baby into his arms, showing him how to support the small head. The infant opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, and seemed to look directly at his father. "Hello, son," Grant said softly. "I am your papa. I promise I will do everything in my power to keep you and your mother safe and happy." They named him Thomas Grant Novak, after both his grandfathers. Little Thomas, as they called him, proved to be a content baby who slept well and ate heartily. Grant was a devoted father, waking with Felicity during night feedings and spending hours simply watching his son sleep. "I never knew I could love someone this much," he told Felicity one night as they both stood over Thomas's cradle. I thought I had reached the limit when I fell in love with you, but this is different, bigger somehow." "I know what you mean," Felicity agreed. "It is terrifying and wonderful all at once." "Are you happy?" Grant asked, pulling her close. "More than I ever dreamed possible. Sometimes I wake up afraid that this is all a dream and I will find myself back on that road, alone and desperate." "This is real," Grant assured her. "Our home, our family, our love, all of it is real and it is not going anywhere." Thomas grew quickly, a cheerful child who inherited his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything, keeping both parents constantly busy and endlessly entertained. Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. The cattle business prospered, and Grant was able to hire more permanent hands, easing his workload. Felicity started a garden that became the envy of the county, growing vegetables and herbs that she sold in town. She also began teaching the ranch hands to read and write during the winter months when work was slower, finding joy in education that she had been denied for so long. On their third wedding anniversary, Grant surprised Felicity with a beautiful mare, gentle enough for her to ride comfortably. "I know you have been wanting to ride more," he said as he led the horse into the yard. "Her name is Willow and she is all yours." Felicity ran her hand along the mare's neck, tears in her eyes. "She is beautiful, thank you. There is something else." Grant pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I have been corresponding with a lawyer. The property in New Mexico that you signed over to Caleb. His death left no will, and since he had no other family and since the coercion has been documented, the property has reverted to you." Felicity stared at the papers. "I do not want it. I know. That is why I had the lawyer sell it. The money is yours to do with as you please. I thought perhaps you might want to use some of it to start a school here in Clifton, a real school where children can learn regardless of their family's ability to pay." "A school?" Felicity's voice was barely a whisper. "You light up when you teach the ranch hands. I thought maybe you would enjoy teaching children too, but it is your money and your choice." Felicity threw her arms around him, crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, I want to start a school." "Grant, you are amazing. How did you even think of this?" "I pay attention to what makes you happy," he said simply. "And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you have everything you need to thrive." The school opened a year later, a small building on the edge of town that Felicity had designed herself. It started with just 8 students, but grew quickly as word spread of the quality of education being offered. Felicity taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and geography, and she did it with a passion that inspired her students. Grant often stopped by during the day, ostensibly to fix something or bring supplies, but really just to watch his wife in her element. She was confident here, authoritative in a way she had never been able to be in her first marriage. It filled him with pride and a renewed sense of gratitude that fate had brought them together. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose Martha Novak, was born when Thomas was 3. She had her father's dark eyes and her mother's auburn hair, and from the moment she entered the world, she had both parents wrapped around her tiny finger. "We are outnumbered now," Grant joked as he watched Thomas gently pat his new sister's hand. "We are blessed," Felicity corrected. "So incredibly blessed." The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas proved to be a natural with animals, spending hours in the barn with his father, learning the ins and outs of ranching. Rose was more interested in books and helped her mother at the school, even as a young child organizing papers and greeting students. When Thomas was 7 and Rose was 4, Felicity discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, and the doctor ordered her to rest more. Grant hired additional help for the school and took over more of the household duties, determined to keep both his wife and unborn child safe. Their third child, another boy they named Daniel William Novak after the ranch hand who had saved their lives, arrived on a snowy December day. He was smaller than his siblings had been, and for a terrifying few hours, his breathing was labored. But he rallied, proving himself to be a fighter, and by the time spring came, he was as healthy and robust as his brother and sister. "I think 3 might be our limit," Felicity said one night as they watched their children sleep. Thomas and Rose shared a room while baby Daniel slept in a cradle next to their bed. "Are you sure?" Grant teased. "I was thinking we could aim for an even dozen." Felicity swatted his arm playfully. "You are the one who would have to be pregnant then." "Point taken. 3 is perfect." And it was perfect. Their life was not without challenges. The ranch had bad years along with good ones, and the children had their share of childhood illnesses and mishaps. But through it all, Grant and Felicity faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Grant took Felicity back to the spot where she had first collapsed all those years ago. The fence had been repaired and repainted, but otherwise it looked much the same. "I think about that day sometimes," Felicity said, standing where she had fallen. "How close I came to just giving up completely." "I am glad you did not," Grant said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I am glad you held on long enough for me to find you. I am glad you did not ride past. Another man might have. Another man would have been a fool." He turned her to face him. "You changed my life, Felicity. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and sleeping and working some more. You gave me a reason to live instead of just exist. You saved me in every way a person can be saved," Felicity replied. "You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You taught me that I was worth loving and that I was capable of so much more than I believed." They stood there for a long time, holding each other as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, they could see their home, smoke rising from the chimney, lights glowing in the windows. Their children were there with Martha, probably causing some kind of chaos, and the thought made both of them smile. "We should get back," Felicity said reluctantly. "In a minute. I want to remember this moment, just us, where it all began." "Where it all began," Felicity echoed. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not collapsed here, if I had made it to town instead?" "Sometimes. But then I remember that some things are meant to be. We were meant to be." They walked back to the house hand in hand, their shadows stretching long in the fading light. As they approached, Thomas ran out to meet them, breathless with excitement. "Papa, Mama, come quick." Daniel took his first steps. They hurried inside to find Rose holding Daniel's hands, guiding him across the floor while Martha watched with proud tears in her eyes. The baby took 3 wobbly steps before falling onto his bottom, but he laughed instead of crying, clapping his hands at his own achievement. The evening passed in the warm chaos of family life. They ate dinner together at the big table, Thomas and Rose recounting their days while Daniel smashed food into his mouth and hair with equal enthusiasm. After dinner, Grant read to the children while Felicity cleaned up, though he kept getting distracted and making up silly voices that had everyone laughing. When the children were finally in bed, Grant and Felicity sat on their porch as they did most nights, listening to the sounds of the desert settling into nighttime quiet. "You ever regret it?" Felicity asked suddenly. "Taking me in that day, your life would have been simpler without me." Grant was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "My life would have been emptier without you. Simpler, maybe, but what is the point of a simple life if it is lonely? You gave me everything that matters, Felicity. Love, family, purpose. How could I ever regret that?" I just worry sometimes that I brought too much trouble into your life. The fire, Caleb, all of it. That was not you. That was circumstances beyond your control. And even if I had known everything that would happen, I would still make the same choice. I would still carry you into my house. I would still fall in love with you. I would still fight for you. He took her hand. You are not trouble and you are not a burden. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Felicity leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and soap and something uniquely Grant. I love you, not just for saving me, but for seeing me, for believing I was worth saving when I could not see it myself. You were always worth saving. You just needed someone to remind you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. In the distance, a coyote howled and Felicity felt Grant's arm tighten around her protectively, even though they were safely home. The years continued their march. Thomas grew into a strong young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. On his 18th birthday, Grant made him a full partner in the ranch, acknowledging all the hard work and dedication Thomas had shown. Rose graduated from her mother's school and then went to Denver for teacher training, returning 2 years later to take over some of the teaching responsibilities. Daniel, the baby who had fought so hard to live, proved to be the most adventurous of the three, always exploring and getting into harmless mischief. Grant and Felicity aged gracefully, their hair turning gray, lines deepening around their eyes from years of smiling and squinting in the bright Arizona sun. But their love never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, rooted deep like the cottonwoods along the creek. When Thomas was 22, he married a sweet girl named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was held at Grant and Felicity's home, with half of Clifton in attendance. As Grant watched his son exchange vows, he caught Felicity's eye across the crowd and saw tears streaming down her face. That night, as they prepared for bed, he asked about those tears. "I was thinking about how far we have come," Felicity said. "When I met you, I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left to offer the world, but look at what we built. Look at our son starting his own family. Look at our children, all of them healthy and happy and good people. We did that, Grant, together." "We did," he agreed, pulling her close. "And I would do it all over again in a heartbeat." Rose married 2 years later, and Daniel eventually followed suit, bringing home a spirited young woman who reminded both Grant and Felicity of Felicity in her youth. Soon there were grandchildren filling the house with laughter and chaos, and Grant and Felicity found new joy in watching their children become parents themselves. The school Felicity had founded thrived and eventually expanded, with additional teachers hired to manage the growing student body. Felicity cut back on her teaching as she aged, but she still came by regularly to read to the younger children, who adored their grandma Felicity. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. The entire town came, filling their home and spilling out into the yard. People gave speeches about the impact Grant and Felicity had made on the community, about the school that had educated hundreds of children, about the ranch that employed so many families, about the love they showed each other that inspired everyone who knew them. When it was finally over and they were alone again, Felicity said, "Did you ever imagine this? When you picked me up that day, I imagined hope," Grant replied. "I imagined possibility, but this exceeds anything I could have dreamed." They stood on their porch, as they had thousands of times before, looking out at the land they had built a life on. In the distance, they could see lights from Thomas's house, built on the far edge of the property. Rose and her family lived in town, but they visited often. Daniel had built his home near the creek, and smoke rose from his chimney now. "We did good," Felicity said softly. "We did better than good. We created a legacy. As the years passed, their bodies grew frailer, but their spirits remained strong. They still took their evening walks, though slower now, and they still sat on the porch every night, though Grant made sure there were plenty of cushions for Felicity's aching joints. Grant was 72 when he had a minor heart episode. The doctor said he needed to slow down, take it easy. Felicity, 70 years old herself, fussed over him relentlessly until he teased her about being a mother hen, echoing the words she had used so long ago. "I am allowed to fuss," she retorted. "You are stuck with me, and I intend to keep you around as long as possible." "Good," Grant replied. "Because I am not going anywhere without you." They spent more time together than ever, their children and grandchildren managing most of the day-to-day operations of the ranch and school. They read together, told stories about the old days, and simply enjoyed each other's company. One spring evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Felicity said quietly, "Do you remember what I said to you that first week, when I was still trying to leave? You said you would not burden me long. And do you remember what you said?" Grant smiled, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "I said you were not a burden, you were my future." "You were right," Felicity said, taking his hand. "I was your future, and you were mine. We built this future together, and it was better than anything I could have imagined." "We are not done yet," Grant protested. "We still have years ahead of us." "I know. But I wanted you to know, while I can still say it clearly, that you gave me a life worth living. You took a broken woman and helped her become whole again. That is a gift beyond measure." Grant brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently as he had done countless times over the years. "You were never broken. You were wounded, yes, but never broken. And you healed yourself. I just provided a safe place for you to do it." They sat together as the stars emerged, as they had done for over 30 years, each comfortable in the silence, each complete in the presence of the other. Grant lived to see his 80th birthday, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Felicity, 78, planned the entire celebration despite her own failing health. It was a grand affair, with people coming from all over to honor the man who had built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of kindness and integrity. A year later, Grant passed away peacefully in his sleep, Felicity beside him as she had been every night of their married life. The entire town mourned, but no one more than Felicity. She had lost her partner, her best friend, her great love. For a time, her children worried she would give up, that losing Grant would break her. But Felicity proved she was still the survivor Grant had always known her to be. She continued on, living in their home, maintaining the school and spending time with her family. "He would want me to keep living," she told Rose when her daughter expressed concern. "He would want me to enjoy every moment we fought so hard to have," and she did. For 5 more years, Felicity lived fully, teaching, loving her family, and keeping Grant's memory alive through stories she told her great-grandchildren. She spoke of him often, always with a smile, remembering not the pain of losing him but the joy of having had him. On a cool autumn evening, as the leaves turned gold and the air smelled of coming winter, Felicity sat on her porch one final time. She was 83 years old and she was tired, but she was not afraid. Around her were her children, her grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, multiple generations of the love she and Grant had created. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Felicity closed her eyes and smiled. In her mind, she could see Grant waiting for her, standing by that old fence where it had all begun, his hand extended toward her. "You are not a burden," she imagined him saying, his voice clear and strong and full of love. "You are my future." "And you were mine," she whispered, "always mine." She passed quietly, peacefully, a life well lived coming to its natural close. Her funeral was even larger than Grant's had been, with people traveling from across the state to pay their respects to the woman who had transformed Clifton through her school and her kindness. They buried her next to Grant on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the legacy they had built together. The headstone was simple, listing their names and dates, but also bearing an inscription chosen by their children that read, "Not a burden but a future, together forever." The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's stewardship and later under his sons. The school grew even larger, eventually becoming the primary school for the entire region. Children who attended learned not just reading and arithmetic, but also heard the story of Grandma Felicity, the woman who had arrived in Clifton with nothing and built something beautiful. Generations later, the story of Grant and Felicity Novak was still told in Clifton, passed down from parents to children. It became a local legend, the story of the rancher who saw worth in a desperate woman and the woman who proved she was worthy of being seen. It was a story about love conquering adversity, about building a future from nothing, about the power of believing in someone when they cannot believe in themselves. But more than that, it was a story about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and chose to build a life together, day by day, year by year, through all the challenges and joys that life brought them. It was a story about a woman who whispered she would not be a burden long and a rancher who replied that she was not a burden at all, but his future. And in proving him right, she found her own future too, brighter and fuller than anything she had dared to dream on that dusty road so many years before. The house they built still stands, maintained by their descendants, a testament to the love that created it. The porch where they sat every evening has been replaced several times, but it always faces the same direction. Toward the sunset, they watched together for more than 3 decades. And on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right, some say you can still feel their presence there. Two souls so intertwined that not even death could separate them, watching over the land and the family and the future they created together. Their story lived on, not just in the memories of their descendants, but in the very fabric of the community they had helped build. The school Felicity founded eventually bore her name, and a scholarship was created in her honor for students who, like her, had faced adversity but refused to give up. The ranch Grant built continued to employ families, providing not just jobs but hope for the future. And every year, on the anniversary of Felicity's arrival in Clifton, the townspeople gathered at that old fence post, now marked with a small plaque, to remember the day everything changed. They told the story again, to children who listened with wide eyes, about love and second chances and the power of seeing someone truly, because that was what Grant had done. He had seen Felicity, really seen her, when she was invisible to the world and even to herself. He had seen her strength when she felt weak, her worth when she felt worthless, her future when she could see only her past. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift one person can give another, the gift of being truly known and loved anyway. And Felicity, in turn, had given Grant a reason to live instead of merely exist. She had filled his empty house with love and laughter, had given him children and grandchildren, had shown him that taking a risk on another person was the most worthwhile thing he would ever do. Together, they had proven that it is never too late to start over, that the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, and that love, real love, can heal even the deepest wounds. They had shown that family is built, not just born, and that home is wherever you are loved completely. Their legacy was not just the land or the school or even their children. Their legacy was the hope they represented, the proof that one act of kindness could change the course of a life, and that two broken people could come together and create something whole and beautiful and lasting. And so the story ended where it began, on a dusty road outside Clifton, Arizona, where a desperate woman collapsed and a lonely rancher chose to care. But it was not really an ending at all. It was a beginning that echoed through generations, a love story that transcended time, a reminder that sometimes the best futures are built from the most difficult pasts. The fence post remained, weathered by time but still standing, much like the love it had witnessed. And on clear nights, when the stars filled the Arizona sky, their descendants sometimes walked out to that spot and stood where Grant first saw Felicity, where everything changed, where two futures became one. They stood there and remembered, not with sadness but with gratitude, that their family, their community, their very existence was built on a foundation of love and courage and the simple decision to see another person's worth. And they carried that legacy forward, helping strangers when they could, offering second chances, remembering that everyone has a story and everyone deserves to be seen. Because that was what Grant and Felicity had taught them. Not through lectures or rules, but through the way they lived, the way they loved, the way they built a life that mattered. They had taught that we are all capable of being both the person who needs help and the person who gives it, that vulnerability is strength, and that opening your heart to another person is always worth the risk. And in the end, that was their greatest gift, not just to their family but to everyone whose life they touched. They had shown that love is not a burden but a future, that together we are stronger than alone, and that the best stories do not have neat beginnings and endings but continue on, rippling outward, touching lives we will never meet, creating futures we cannot imagine. The sun set over Clifton, as it had every evening for 100 years, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The ranch house stood strong, lights glowing warmly in the windows. Children played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. And somewhere, in the space between memory and eternity, Grant and Felicity Novak smiled, knowing their love story would never truly end, because the best love stories never do. They live on in the hearts of those who hear them, in the choices people make to be kind when it would be easier to look away, in the second chances we give each other and ourselves. They live on in every act of compassion, every moment of seeing another person truly, every choice to build a future instead of dwelling in the past. And so their story continues, not bound by time or mortality, but freed by love to echo through the ages. A reminder that we are all capable of transformation, that we all deserve to be seen and loved, and that sometimes, when we are brave enough to whisper our fears, someone will be brave enough to answer with hope. She whispered she would not burden him long. He said she was not a burden, but his future. And together, they proved that both statements could be true, that she would not burden him because love is never a burden, and that she was indeed his future, just as he was hers. A future they built one day at a time, one sunset at a time, one act of love at a time, until their individual futures merged into one beautiful, lasting, eternal whole.